Good evening in my case, everyone. Good morning and good day, wherever else you are. I'm going to tear myself away from the cricket. You might have seen the chat to that extent. New Zealand are playing India at the moment, and it's still only 4 wickets down. So anyway, here's fingers crossed. So I'm here to talk about the geoscience vocabularies work that CGI does. And we do this through the Geoscience Terminology Working Group. I'm the chair of that group. I guess we'll just have a very quick look at, what are geoscience vocabularies. And so they're basically lists of terms that organize and describe Earth features, properties, quantities, techniques, processes, etc. So they're lists. So in the bottom here, you can see a number of names of different types of lists, and each one of those will contain anything from several to possibly hundreds of different values within them, or terms. And so these lists have been agreed upon by, in our case, the working group, and many organizations will create vocabularies like this. So they will, for their own purposes. But so the idea is that they're agreed terms, you're kind of limited to the use of those terms. So synonyms or can be avoided where you may be saying the same thing with different words. So the idea is to try and get a little bit more precise and constrained in terms of their terminology. And of course, ultimately, it needs to be machine-to-machine readable. And so why do we have it? Well, it's, as I've just outlined, it's to convey that unambiguous meaning. And this is to convey understanding of what we mean when we refer to a name of a feature or a concept and so forth. It can be multilingual, so we can have the translations of different terms, and I'll talk about that a bit later on. It's about reducing confusion around synonyms. And also these terminologies are very hierarchical, so we can actually take advantage of those hierarchies. So there are groups of things can have a number of different lists that may be under, the terms can be hierarchical within a list. So you can have overarching terms that maybe are a group of rock types, for example, but then you can get more and more specific in terms of the rock type. And of course, as Eric and Michael have already talked about, we use these vocabularies to support the implementation of some of these standard models. So the Geoscience Terminology Working Group, we've got about 30 members. You can see the list of countries through there. There's a level of activity that varies amongst those members. And we work very collaboratively with the other CGI working groups, particularly the RML and the GSIML. But more recently, we're starting to work with the Deep Time Digital Earth project. And of course, our vocabularies are used by a number of applications around there, including One Geology. Typically, we meet, well, there was a time when we met annually face to face, and you can see a list of places that and these have been co-located with some of the other working groups and CGI meetings. And with the course of the pandemic, that's kind of slowed down a bit. So here's our Geoscience Terminology Working Group here, and we're supporting GeoSciML, Earth Resource ML. I need a pointer, don't I? Just try and grab that. Not sure how to get the pointer working.
I think I see your mouse pointer.
Oh, do you? Okay, well, that's good. I don't need it then.
It's working.
Thank you, Harvey. So yes, so supporting these, the Deep Time Digital Earth, and then potentially other groups that require sort of vocabulary related vocabularies for various interoperability requirements. So it's not exclusively to these models, these other working groups, but certainly the last 10 years has been very much about sort of supporting them. So I think we've seen the complexity of the Earth Resource ML model and the GSI ML model, and I don't want to really go into any depth into what I'm trying to show here, other than almost every field or effectively item within a lot of these boxes here has a supporting vocabulary, and I'm pointing out in particular the simple lithology one here, or lithology, which is supported by a vocabulary. So as a working group, we have a process. The process is that we have a list of vocabularies that we have identified as needing to be created. So we propose that a particular vocabulary is worked on. We assign what we call a shepherd. A shepherd is, like in the agricultural sense, you're trying to round up a whole lot of fairly unwilling sort of partners to get and herd them into an area to get some work done. So we try and establish what we're trying to do in terms of dates and milestones. That shepherd and the team is not necessarily within the working group. It can be people that the shepherd knows through their own organisation or experts they're aware of within the space. And between them, they will compile a draft vocabulary list. They'll seek feedback and so forth through that process. And once they've got it to a certain level of maturity, they're going to invite a formal review. Again, there could be feedback coming back from that review to make changes. Then it's invited for adoption by the GTWG group itself. And again, it's potential for a little bit more feedback. But ultimately, once we're all happy that enough changes have been made, it's serving the purpose, then we're going to publish it on the host service. So to do that, we work very much in the spreadsheet domain. In fact, we use some of the Google tools, Drive tools, the Google Sheets documents. So this would be a typical, and this particularly is exploration activity, which is one of the vocabularies which underpins the Earth Resource ML model. And here we're looking at a bunch of terms which relate to exploration activity up here. And you can see there's levels of hierarchy. So this regional reconnaissance has got 1, 2, 3, 4 different subcategories, and each one of those is given a definition. On further columns which are not exposed here, we talk about the source of the definition, and we've got a sort of a history of how we've come to agree on those terms. Of course, you can turn that into a SCOS encoded RDF file. So this is the machine-to-machine sort of capability that we're trying to achieve. And ultimately, it's published and it appears on our host server. So we have a host service, which is Geoscience Australia, run on our behalf. And this, again, is the same regional geochemistry value with its definition and so forth. And it's part of the regional geochemistry list. Sorry, the exploration activity type list. Okay, so in the course of quite a while, and the GTWG began its life in 2014 with Steve Richard setting it up. But before that, a lot of the vocabulary development work had happened under the GSIML umbrella, which Eric kind of alluded to, until it was separated out. So we can't claim to have done all of this work through the GTWG, but certainly these vocabularies here are now published and available for GSIML. These are the ones which relate to Earth Resource ML. We have a number which in various stages of preparation here. We've got some more which are actually completed, but we haven't just pushed them over the line yet in terms of publication. And then there's a number which are still in the proposed basket. Plenty of work to do. And we certainly have multilingual aspirations. Here again is a list of all of those different vocabularies here, and it's color coded. Anything in grey has not been started, but anything in red has got quite a long way to go, but has been started. Anything in green has actually reached some level of completion. So you can see that it's a massive task. This requires a lot of experts in specific themes of geology with language skills able to create the translation, and obviously with a lot of time to be able to make this happen. And as a consequence, this is not happening real fast. It's a very slow process, but it's still on the books. Michael showed the Minerals for You project as an example of the Earth Resource ML application. And of course, it's using the vocabularies to create symbolization of specific features. In this case, we're using basically the mineral occurrence type or the element types. There's plenty of other map applications out there. The One Geology one is certainly using our vocabularies and so forth, but this is a local example for me. It's a rock properties database that we run in New Zealand. And the idea here is that we're using the simple lithology tables in a hierarchical way. So when we were searching for a specific group of rocks, we may be interested in all types of basalt as opposed to basalt and phonolite and Hawaiiite and so forth. So we can use the hierarchical nature of these vocabularies to extract all of the information out of this rock properties database. So the whole concept of FAIR, and Mikael had addressed this in the first talk, is applying the FAIR data principles to vocabularies. So last year through the Go FAIR and the CoData joint conference, we had a session on making vocabularies fair. And so this is kind of a self-assessment of where we are with the CGI vocabularies in terms of findable, accessible, interoperable, reusable. It's fair to say that we're doing fairly well in the accessible, interoperable aspects, but there's a little bit further we can go in terms of the findability and aspects relating to the reusable. One of the issues with the findability of our vocabularies are there's just the sheer number of competing vocabularies, if you are like out there, and our ability to sort of get our head above the parapet. So, but there's many reasons why CGI vocabulary should be better known and more widely used. And I think the reasons I've come listed here, one is that they're international through both their construction and their implementation. So they do have a large number of countries contributing to their formation. They're organized around these standard data models, so they have some sort of reason for existence, I guess, and some level of consistency and deliberate formation. So they're not completely randomized in terms of lists, that they relate to specific features in these data models. And I guess the other thing which was coming out of some of these conferences is that we're talking a lot more about the governance of vocabularies, and the CGI ones are supported by an enduring CGI IUGS umbrella. So that actually makes them reliable in the sense that they will potentially persist a lot longer than maybe shorter term project related vocabularies or even some institutional ones. So I think coming up, you know, we still have priorities which haven't changed a great deal. We are trying to compile and publish remaining vocabularies that both the GeoSciML and the Earth Resource ML data models are requiring. So there are plenty of those still to look at. In the process, we know that there are many shortcomings in some of the existing vocabularies, and so we're improving our processes around how we can actually make the adjustments. We can get rid of the spelling errors, and we can add the new terms or take out the synonyms and so forth. So we've got this ability to do these updates, and that needs to be done for many of our vocabularies. Of course, the multilingual thing, and that's going to be a job that's going to take a very long time unless we get some sort of massive umbrella project with a real incentive to steamroll, to really get some head of steam working on that one. Of course, we need to promote and promote the use and the application of these vocabularies. So it's about making sure that our vocabularies are actually out there. I think in terms of geological survey uptake, it's relatively good, but I'm pretty sure that a lot of our vocabularies are pretty much unknown to the academic space, for example, and possibly pretty not well known in the industry space either. So, I think we've got a job to do in trying to push those vocabularies out. And in terms of the challenges, well, I think we've got issues around just trying to make progress. As a group, we need to find time, preferably all at the same time, to make progress. Face-to-face meetings were, a great way of doing that. The pandemic has sort of put that on ice a little bit at the moment. So, we actually, it's a very difficult process for us to make. And one of the things that makes it happen is having one of these international projects that really demand vocabulary development. So the Inspire project, for example, was one of those that created a lot of impetus to get some of these vocabularies more mature. The Earth Resource ML implementation of a few years ago was a massive push from the vocabulary space to kind of keep pace with their requirements. So it's really useful to have those international projects to get a charge on and complete them. So that's all I'm going to talk about this evening. There is an email to contact for this comes to me as the chair of the group. We have a membership which is open to anyone who has skills either in vocabularies and information management aspects, or domain experts in some sort of geoscience area, or even both. So people who have an interest in either of those areas, and particularly in terms of creating these vocabularies, would be happy to have you join us and help us make some more progress. So thank you, Harvey. I think that's me.
Thank you, Mark, for a very helpful overview. And before we focus on the chat, who has a question or a comment for Mark?
I can start. I am attending the presentation, and I think that it is a strong view and interest about interoperability formats and machine processing, what is very important. And now I can see the other side, which is the collection of terminology, but I cannot see an ontology discussion, which means what's the meaning of this vocabulary and how indeed we should structure the hierarchy of terms and so on. I know that ontologists are boring people that is trying to organize and put things in box and so on, but this is really necessary for this giant work that we are facing here. Any comments?
Sure, Mara. Yeah, no, I understand. It's sort of work in progress, I guess. The vocabulary concept aligned to the data models is now a concept which is 15 or possibly more years older. So the ontological component is out there. I think Steve, I can see Steve's raised his hand, but he and Boyan are about to talk on exactly that aspect. So maybe they can shed some light there. Steve, do you want to comment?
I was just going to say one of the approaches that when we were developing the vocabularies was the thinking that the starting point would be actually developing a SCOS kind of vocabulary with definitions that were logically coherent and consistent. And that could form the basis then for the next step of actually converting those into a formal ontology. But it seemed like actually getting agreement on the definitions that were logically consistent was a good starting point. And that's kind of where we're at this point.
It is indeed a good starting point, and making people agree about meaning is I mean, agree about meaning is different than having this logically consistent, but is a big step. Yes, indeed.
Very good. Thank you for this discussion. And I'm looking at the chat, and we have Simon Cox drew our attention to a paper on making vocabularies fair. Thank you, Simon. Leslie Wyborn, thank you with your remarks on IUGS, and please everyone read that chat. And Steve Richard, you commented on marketing, and Rachel mentioned linked open vocabularies. So thank you for that link in the chat. Christina Ash, thank you for your role in CGI from the beginning, and thank you for your remark about multilinguality, about being a good approach for vocabs and CGI. And Leslie, thank you for additional links, mentioning ESIP and other ontology-related matters. Steve Richard, thank you. You mentioned that you've added them to the ESIP Community Ontology Registry. And Leslie, thank you also for your additional links. So thank you, Christina, for that nice remark. Who's next with a question or comment?
Eric's got a question there, which was, what is the most pressing translation or more domains, more terms? To be blunt, I think it's going to be more domains. I think we were trying to get the English versions down first. It's not necessarily an either or. We can do these things in parallel, and we've been doing a bit of work, particularly with the British Geological Survey, in terms of some sort of machine learning approaches to try to do some of these translations. So the figure that I showed with the multiple colours and so forth was an output from the British Geological Survey in terms of their abilities to translate a lot of these terms in a semi-automated way. So I think, on balance, I think the group as a whole is trying to just finish as many vocabularies as it can, but at the same time, that translation work is still ongoing.
Very good. Well, thank you, Mark, and thank you, everyone, for discussion. And so I think it's time to proceed. And Boyan, I am making you a co-host. And so Boyan, please go ahead.